wait 1 more minute, so that the whole room can fill. Yes? Yes?
I think he's asking if you would use the chat for questions. You could leave it logged in on a...
Yeah, we log it in, and then people can ask questions from around the stream. Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Welcome. This is the panel, and it's on linked data, a decentralized web. So, in our opinion, the future of open source. Let's start off by introduction of the people in the panel.
Good afternoon. My name is DB, and I am the founder of Modock, which is an open source marketing automation company.
Hi, my name is Gabriel Engel, and I'm the founder of Rocket Chat, which is an open source collaboration platform.
My name is Eva. I'm a senior UX designer at Consensus, which is an Ethereum blockchain startup studio.
Wow, it's all around open source. Could you elaborate a little bit more on the open source part of your activities?
Well, so our company Consensus works a lot with the Ethereum blockchain, and it's open source. And it has got a really great developer community. They try to reach consensus on a lot of governance issues. Everything we do is trying to be about, the decentralized web of the future.
Cool.
I got my start in open source in the CMS space, actually. And for those in the room that don't know, I was actually heavily involved in the Joomla CMS community. Through that, had opportunity to meet and become very good friends with Dries. And he and I have been in close contact ever since. And I was running an agency, a digital agency, and a lot of the clients that we were serving wanted marketing solutions, and there was nothing in that space that was open source, and it went against everything I believed, and so I thought it seemed like a perfectly good opportunity to create something. So that was really where Modock got its start, and it's been growing as an open source project and then product ever since.
Yeah, so Rocket Chat started also something that we are looking in the market to find an open source application, to be able to both talk to customers on the website of our website that we're developing, have our team to collaborate, be able to integrate the CRM, and we couldn't find something that was easy to plug in and to consume all those data sets, and we ended up building one. And I guess it happened on the same time where Slack was like building all this momentum and attracting people out of IRC. We were Slack users, so we got heavily inspired in some part of what Slack was building on the user experience. And we decided that all that good user experience shouldn't only belong on a private proprietary application. So we built this open source version of Slack to start with.
Okay. And could you elaborate a little bit more of the origins of Rocket Chat with regards to email?
So, in regards to email, the way it's almost like a vision that came after we built the product, and now we started to understand where we want to go. Because initially it was just this team collaboration, so it was only to provide the features for our team to talk, and then to talk to customers on their website. But then surely the next thing they realize is this is just another silo, and then it's not really a collaboration if you are, I don't know, just focused in internal an organization. And then what we started to build was we need to decentralize those servers, interconnect the servers, and create a federated network to get people to talk to each other in different companies. And then when you look back, the best technology for this, which is the email, is almost like it didn't evolve fast enough, so the user experience with email became slow. Somehow it's a digital technology, but it's slow. And then we said, why can we not bring the good parts of email, of being federated by having global identity handler and an open protocol and open source and can be deployed anywhere, but with all the bells and whistles of Slack or Telegram and all those other modern tools. So this is now our vision and our main purpose.
Okay. David, Modock is also revolving around email. How did you use that and increase on top of that?
Sure. When marketing automation was in its early days in the infancy, it centered heavily around email marketing. In fact, I think a lot of the marketing automation tools today still focus on email drip campaigns and consider that to be marketing automation. So when we first started with Modock, we understood we needed to create a platform that was feature parity with existing tools. So we implemented email marketing as one of the aspects of marketing automation, but quickly pushed beyond that to a full omni-channel solution, so web push and mobile push and just a bunch of different ways in which you can actually send that message to the user, but email is still one of the most primarily used ones.
It's still the primary used ones in any office space. That's why the question, since we can view this as a sort of start of the web, where we had these nice pages where you could click on and email to read and write to your peers. Then we got to the second web, which is like the Drupal 7 CMS is now. And with 8, it went on until the third web. Eva, can you tell us on the ideas around the third web, its history, and then where it's supposed to be going?
Sure. I think that understanding of Web 3 has changed. Web 2.0 was about democratizing user-produced content. That's Drupal. That's also Facebook. And then like 10 years ago, there was this idea of semantic web, which was going to be about Web 3.0, and that was about taking all of our data and machine learning, applying intelligent agents to like improve our daily lives. And things like Siri and all, like Amazon Echo are trying to come out of that. The problem with that is that the privacy activists have said that, that's an invasion of our privacy, and these companies are using this data to sell more to us. So we have this, these activists have created this different vision of Web3 now that's moving more towards a decentralized internet. So decentralization looks like decentralized infrastructure, federated, end-to-end encryption, so that we have like self-sovereign identity and things like that, and can like own our own data. And then the thing that blockchain tries to add now is decentralized incentives. So removing the middlemen and trying to figure out ways to incentivize people, if they own their own data, to still collaborate and share all this and have marketplaces where users also benefit, not just Facebook. So.
Okay, that gives a real clear picture on where it's now and where it's going. Really, really good. From here, I would like to go to the definition of our title. What is linked data? Gabriel, can you tell us what you define?
Yeah, I can tell in the context of Rocket Chat and on the messaging systems as a whole. So I think what we see as it started as this whole just link previews. When you post about something, you have like this little thumbnail and a description and gather more information about the website. The community quickly understood that we could go far beyond this. And then so having, when you share a document or you share issue on GitHub or you share something, rather than just having the preview, you'd maybe on that channel, if it's a task, you could list all the tasks that were shared. You could have the buttons to mark that those are done or closed from inside that. And it's only when you have all those understanding what each data element is, even when it's shared on a streaming of messages, then you can create actions and can actually create meaning out of this. And we extend this in Rocket Chat, allowing people to create apps. Then they can extend and create their own data types, their own references to objects outside that conversation, and also create their own renders for these new data types. So this is where we see we want to be able to link data objects that can be on a blockchain or anywhere and they can be rendered on this conversation.
It's a very clear and vivid expression on practicalities.
Yeah.
David, can you give us a more abstracted view on linked data?
Sure. In the early days of the World Wide Web, there was the concept of RDF as a way of linking information on the web. In fact, Tim Berners-Lee is a strong proponent for believing this to be the way, and even today considers it still to be one of the primary ways in which we can link data across a variety of websites, applications, servers, and make it easily accessible between them all. One of the more popular ones recently here that's come up is JSON LD, or JSON linked data. In fact, the World Wide Web Consortium really just announced that that was the standard by which they're going, because it makes it easier for developers who are already familiar with JSON to be able to create JSON LD as a format of linked data to begin to provide a mechanism by which that data can be stored and then retrieved and linked across multiple sites.
Okay. So it's not just systems that can operate within each other, but even with humans.
Right, yeah.
Okay. Speaking on human side of point of view, we have had the GDPR crashing at us. We saw it coming for 2 years, but nobody noticed it. And now these data are getting linked or are already linked. We have the big data, we have the artificial intelligence on top of it. How could we go for a solution where we have our privacy as well as interoperability and value within data? Eva, can you tell us something about that?
Sure. There are several projects exploring things like secure multi-party computation, where, like Enigma or Ocean, where your data is private, but they can still run algorithms on it that produce interesting results, and they never have to reveal, like private health information. So those kind of projects are really interesting. And then there's also the sense of, if everybody owns their own data, like what incentivizes anybody to, to mine it or to, analyze it? And then how do you also get to like Google Cloud scale type of infrastructure? Like who pays for that? So again, like the incentives, if users could, sort of provide their data in a private way and then benefit from that, get rewarded for that, and then other companies can provide, really interesting algorithms on top of that, to provide you even more benefits. I think there's this idea of a marketplace forming for all this, and I think it's really cool.
Great. So in this way, we can go from the data and the privacy to silos. Everybody works and thinks in their own silos.
One thing actually I think is very interesting is that we see that there's the ability for SaaS companies to be able to kind of return to their roots of what an application really should be, and that's centered around the functionality, or as you mentioned, the algorithms, as opposed to it being a data warehouse, which is typically what modern SaaS today, they see themselves really as a data lake where they're collecting everyone's information and then using it for either to provide you with better results, but also to gain more monetary benefit for themselves. And so I think that as we look at the future of things where the data is controlled by the user instead, it allows software companies to be able to return to the idea of creating software and creating algorithms to run on data as opposed to maybe focusing on the data aspect. It returns the true value of the data to the user as opposed to the company.
Thank you for this add-on. No, it's good, because I wanted to jump to the silos already, but it's good to stand still and think about the implications of this new SaaS model and the one company to rule the world and save you all from harm and so on. The same transition we see also with Drupal. It used to be the mega toolbox with whom you could do everything you wanted, and now it's getting more abstracted to be the ultimate idea to have content modeled, to have revisions on top of that, and to have proper access and permissions to that. So the next question would be, how does this fit together? If it is in a thing where a monolithic company fixes it all, we're not having interoperable services and we're not having a data landscape. So should a SaaS product be as specific as a Drupal module or a Linux program in order to do only that only task? Whoever wants to add a direction to this question.
I don't know.
And you mean like serverless? Like Lambda functions?
Yeah,
That's what you mean.
the specificity of a SaaS model and a SaaS product. You've shared with us some great examples of authentication, and there is other services that you can make really, really narrow. Or should it be more wide as a solution, just as Google does?
So I think actually what we're seeing, and correct me if you think differently, but I think we're seeing a landscape where either option is possible. You can create a single function and build a product and build a market around that single function, but you could also create a whole variety of services and offerings and sell that either as one gigantic thing or as multiple services. I think when you extract the functionality away from just a data store, you have the ability to, like you mentioned, serverless, the idea of being able to run even something as small as a single function as a Lambda function, and then offer that as a product even.
Okay, cool. From there, being specific and well in a certain thing is a very good measure. However, it also makes a service dependent upon all kinds of other services. And you get replacement factor. So you might change Drupal, for example, for WordPress or for Joomla. How do you cope with that within your company to make it that all the people want you? Gabriel.
Well, in our case, we try to be agnostic of those other servers from start. So we rely on the community as well to build those apps that interconnect with different CMSs, different conferencing applications. So we have integrations with Jitsi, you have integrations with Big Blue Button, and people are building all their different connections as long as we have kind of a standard API that you could use. So we always just try to keep enough of an abstraction layer so it doesn't really matter what you're plugging into. And both also what you're plugging into with different chat providers. If have bridges to IRC, bridges to Slack, bridges to everything else. So it's more of this abstraction layer in between.
Also important to that is this idea of the metadata you need to keep. And there's many different frameworks to sort of like JSON LD and like trying to categorize different kinds of metadata. And the privacy of metadata is also another layer of privacy issues. So there's privacy at the protocol level for a blockchain, there's privacy in your own data, and then there's privacy that you're actually having transactions and stuff in the protocol. So that's also an issue, the metadata, yeah. And I think even apps like Single that are worried about metadata, and so that's why they're not federated.
So we see two solutions, one being fairly adaptable, flexible, same as the Drupal is doing, and we see a specific solution where you have just managed to have the best solution. Beyond security and privacy, what are the other benefits of having these landscapes of data decentralized?
Well, in our case, it's more of not having gatekeepers in any way. And I think you can see if most of the Telegram, WhatsApp, and those other platforms where a government can easily just shut it down. And that happened even in Brazil, which is a democracy, and there was no uprising or anything. It was just a judge one day decided that they would request certain type of data. Facebook didn't have it, and then they shut it down for a whole day. And then if you have companies depending on this kind of service or groups, anything, it would be without a communication platform for days. And if you don't have gatekeepers, like you are free from supervision, free from being blocked. And this is for us the biggest differentiation.
Okay. And Eva, you with us, you also shared some very good examples on how blockchain technology and decentralization helps society. Could you also share that with the audience?
Which ones?
The ones about the sensors in the city for the bombing and some other.
Censorship resistance,
Yeah.
you know, like Catalonia or like other examples. There was one project being explored where you have IoT sensors in somewhere like Syria, and they can keep track of what bombings are happening, and no one can delete that record because it ends up being on a blockchain. And that's really good for human rights, you know, observations. But in general, censorship resistance is a really great feature of blockchain in that it's peer-to-peer, so anyone can run it, it's encrypted, and that's like a really important part of, you know, the decentralization movement.
Great. Still staying a little bit on the topic of decentralization in regards to Mautic. You have a great open source platform, in my opinion, the only one that does that. And you also have a SaaS solution. Are there plans or is there already a process to implement decentralization?
So obviously this is something that's still very, very new and fresh, and we're still trying to determine, I think, as a whole in technology, how it's best to be implemented. So it's certainly something that we're discussing and talking about. The first step in that, in my opinion, is to be able to separate out the data from the functionality of the software, like we talked about earlier. And so with Modock 3, which is our next major release that we're just getting underway, that's one of the major features of it, is making it headless. And serverless as well. So then you can actually take that functionality and split it in half. And then once we are able to do that, it becomes very easy for that next step of saying, okay, if you would like to control the data yourself and move that somewhere else, you're fully capable to do so.
Great. I also read and seen that there's a lot of plans for Rocket Chat Federation. Without going into your talk for tomorrow or the day after?
The day after.
The day after, you can see the whole story behind this, but now you get a little tip.
Yeah, so one thing that you don't want to do every time you start a new project is to reinvent the wheel. But a good thing is always to look the past technologies and try to understand when they failed and why don't everybody has an XMPP account, why it has not become a reality, and or why so many companies dropped their support of XMPP. So what we actually done, it was revisit best technologies, see what are the drawbacks, why they didn't succeed. We started to work with partner technologies like Matrix, which is a federation protocol. We have some disagreement of, I think, because the way they're doing in creating a new ID, we think that the right way forward to make it remove the friction for new users and actually use their email as their ID and really go more as an evolution of an email server than trying to build something from scratch. But I think they're using JSON as the main package for the payloads. So I think we agreed in almost everything they did, and we're trying to build something that is even Matrix compatible. But we don't want people to have to rely on third-party ID providers. But so I'll tell more in 2 days from now. But that's a beta that we have running, and we'll be very happy to show.
Great, it's very interesting. Definitely going to see that. In Drupal, we are originally communicating on one of the first federated networks, IRC. Who in the room knows IRC? About all hands should go up now. Yes. Who is still using it actively? There's just a few, or none. We made a transition, went to Slack due to that some people went doing that. And that is a very interesting one because what I type today isn't there the day after tomorrow, since we have the free version. In this process and having other solutions provided for the community, and even links with the matrix between IRC, Slack, and Rocket Chat. It led to a certain fear within a community due to that in the early days you could just get a log from the IRC and publish it online, and that happened and people don't know, don't want. I'm looking for tips and directions on how to cope with this fear.
Well, I think there is still the point that you have to trust the provider of the servers in some ways, because even if you're running a server that with a client that says they have an end-to-end encryption, the sysadmins of an open source can always change the source code and publish especially a different client. If it's a browser-based, you won't be able to verify it, and you're still sharing your data. So there is a level of trust with the provider in all levels if you're using their own client. But what we try to do in Rocket Chat is, I think there's different levels of what you want. A lot of communities, they actually want the conversation to go public out of the public channels. They want that to be searchable by Google. They want to turn that conversation into knowledge. So you have one end of the spectrum where people almost don't like the Telegrams and WhatsApps because the conversation dies there, and they would love that conversation to become available so it can be searched and people don't make the same question over and over again. And then you have the other end of the spectrum where you want to be able to say something and nobody will ever be able to read that again. So our community actually implemented these several steps, and in one way you have a message that it only leaves for a few minutes, and then the browser will drop the keys and you're never heard again, and you have on the other spectrum publishable logs. I'm not sure I have an answer on how you fix the trust issue, but maybe with verified clients, and then instead of using the mobile clients, the web clients, you use verified published clients. I think that's the only way that you can trust that those features are being implemented the right way.
I guess with Ethereum related, they're working on Whisper, which is going to be like a secure messaging layer. Let's see, they have Swarm, which is sort of a incentivized sort of IPFS, but sort of incentivized file sharing. But the difference with IPFS is that it's encrypted, and IPFS, you can build encryption on top of it, but it's not default, so it's not censorship resistant. So there's different kinds of platforms being explored right now in terms of just storing data securely. It's being explored, and then there's the private key UX, which is still a huge problem. I don't know, how do you guys solve the private key UX?
So it was a few different ways. One of them we generate on the browser and then have a QR code if you want to import that into the mobile. There is also some people did sharing the keys, the public keys with the other part if you are both online at the same time, and then it's shared via WebRTC, so it doesn't go via the server. The server doesn't see, it's a direct link. So those are different implementations, because depending on how, there's this exchange of a good user experience, making it easy, or making it hard to use but then more secure. And then we found that different people have a different level of what's their trade-off. So we have seen different implementations.
What we did as the simplest and easy solution is per channel that is bridged, notify it in the header, show people what you type here at Drupal Europe will also be in Telegram at Drupal Europe, and on enter you accept that this is a fact. A marketing automation system is supposed to be close to the outside and really open in the inside. And when you make the steps to federation, open API, you have to cope with the same problem also. Do you have any add-ons to this?
Add-ons, maybe not so much. It's absolutely something that takes a lot of thought to make sure that it's implemented in a way that can still provide a level of privacy to the user and give the user the control over their data. I think things such as GDPR have gone a long way in the marketing space in general to encourage marketers and the providers of marketing software to be more aware and maybe work on different ways in which they can better control how that data is used and accessed. I truly do believe in the most base sense of the word that an open source type of platform where the marketer and the user is able to see what data is collected and how the data is able to be used is the best solution, because that provides a level of transparency that you don't find in other systems.
Fully agree with the open source being the easiest way to gain and keep trust in that part. Okay, we have about 12 minutes left. Is there any questions meanwhile from the audience that we can take? If not, then I'll put in a few others. We see hands? No? Okay, then we continue with the communication part, since that is the key factor that is most important with linked data and having people involved. If it's just machines, they just obey the rules and will go where they're supposed to be going. But the people, they make it interesting. So maybe we can add some stories or some ideas on this.
I should probably talk about self-sovereign identity and that user controlling their own linked data, having access to their own private key, and then allowing different parties to request, that you can verify things with them, or they can verify things with you. There's also the KYC AML stuff with identity in Uport. So a bank can, verify a claim that you have this address or that you're over 18. There's always this idea of minimal data possible. So like if you want to know they're an adult, only ask that question, whether or not the bank knows exactly how old you are. So things like that. There's that kind of stuff that's really important, for identity and privacy.
I think in addition to that, the interesting thing about that is it has the potential to change the valuation and the monetization of that, because it shifts it from being the company-led to the user-led. The user has the opportunity to monetize their own data in a way that they might choose, because they might choose to share additional information if they were receiving something in return for that. And so there's the opportunity for that data, which we all agree is so incredibly important these days, to actually be owned by the user as opposed to owned by a company that would be using it to make a profit.
Great. When working and processing with humans, there's a very important factor that comes to software, that is the user experience. So maybe you can have some thoughts on if there is many different linked data services around, what would be the user experience that is needed.
I think that may be one of the biggest areas that's still under very, very active work with stuff that's related to Web3. The user experience, I think many would admit, is tricky, to say the least, and in some cases extremely convoluted. And once we're able to make a user experience that simplifies the process of creating an identity and then how I can store that data and how I can access it without it having to be a 13-step process involving a specific browser extension and 16 special words, once we're able to make that user experience more streamlined, I think then we'll be able to see a faster and wider adoption of Web3 and decentralized apps and things like that. So I believe it's fundamentally important to Web3 being adopted, is that user experience.
Yeah, so there's some projects like Pretty Easy Privacy where you can tell somebody your public key over the phone by giving them 5 words, I think. With Ethereum, that would take 16 words. It's still okay over the phone, but you know, it's a little bit long. Yeah, the UX is just really hard with decentralization. And I think it's interesting again that like, you know, Signal they chose to go after the 100 million users. And that's why, you know, they're not federated, and they're like, you know, people change messaging apps on a dime, so that's why it's really important to them. And even though he's a cryptographer and an anarchist, like he's still going after that. And that's the trade-off. It's almost like a Cap-Theron thing, like you can only pick 2 things, and usability has to be sacrificed. This is still the problem with decentralized architectures and infrastructure, and it's still trying to be solved, but it's a really, really hard problem. Now we have this web of wallets, so many different keys, ways to have your keys. Like I think Keybase is another company trying to explore this, and just like selling the idea of private keys. And it's cool because, you know, the cypherpunks failed, like trying to make that, you know, more popular. But now because of, you know, like Google and GDPR things, and it's all coming back, you know, people are caring about it more. So maybe now we have a chance to make that really popular.
Yeah, I guess in Rocket Chat we try to do as well is almost sometimes try to use some machine learning as well to get meaning out of those messages, and then be able to create objects with that intent. Then sometimes I think we're building something similar to if you ever use Gmail and then it offers you a quick reply. It's maybe if what you mentioned was a task, then I can turn your message into a task object. If it was an answer or if it was a question with multiple choices, try to turn those all into objects that can be then shared if you want. So we're trying to see how we can extract from just human language and turn into objects that can have a meaning and then be actual linked objects with other systems.
This is a good summary to see how these elements can come together. The Drupal being the content access thing, Modock getting more customers, users, friends in, Rocket Chat facilitating their interoperability, communication, all kinds of other services that can be accessed through bots and all kinds of other linked processes, and blockchain in order to have us keep our own data and our own security and decide what to share with whom. Thank you so much for this panel. We still have 5 minutes if some questions did pop up.
I'll make a question. If you take the integration that the guys from Drupal did already with Rocket Chat and try to a little bit brainstorm of what else could evolve from there, more than just being a identity sharing a single sign-on. Do you think, now I'm going to ask you and see what you say. One of the things we've seen a lot of communities using Rocket Chat have done is they changed the model where channels, everything happens around the channel. For instance, on a hospital, everything happens around the patient. So the patient becomes the channel ID, and then the doctors and everyone that is involved in treating that patient are putting that in that communication. Maybe one way that you could do with Drupal and thinking it as a publishing and having the right process and flow for publishing documents, it's that you can have channels where actually the document or the page that is being published, you can then, if you understand this data object of the channel, you can have the status of that page. You can have bots collaborating on the flow, asking the approval of the person in charge, having all the conversation linked to that data object. So I'm not sure Can you brainstorm in what you think if you put the document as the centerpiece of the communication, how would that look like?
Well, we start Thursday with a birds of a feather, where people flock together and brainstorm and provide solutions on integration between, keeping it close, programmers, GitLab, results automated tested from GitLab, having that inside the chats. And there is already with the Rocket Chat module at Drupal.org the ability to use the fine-graded permission system and link that up directly to what you're supposed to be doing within Rocket Chat. Putting these elements together will make these kinds of ordering a pizza processes accessible and feasible for our own toolset, for making our own software. So that's in the real close terms to realize and to make and to think. And the same thing you could do as well with marketing automation, and on top of that, extra privacy. By design, you ask for an avatar if people want it. It's not necessary. You need an email in order to have a password reset and a nickname of whom the person wants to be. Those three elements you always need. You need it in the CMS, you need it in the chat system. So those are not really like an issue for privacy. After that, what people say and what they share with whom, that's the one that counts for the privacy. Good. We're done.